Thanks, guys. Good afternoon. Having a good show. So I'm from Cisco Systems, as that lady was asking. I am the marketing lead for the Cisco ACI technology. How many of you have heard of ACI, Application-Centric Infrastructure? So you're familiar with A10 networks, right? Some of you are. So in your data centers today, when you're provisioning layer 4, layer 7 services and firewalls, a lot of that is done manually today, right? You're adding a firewall and a load balancer manually for a given application. You have a lot of silos of these, L2 to L7 islands of these silos, giving you a lot of problems in operations and maintenance and troubleshooting. So what we are going to present here is how the Cisco's policy-based ACI framework, which is essentially an application-centric strategy. So it's a new networking architecture from Cisco. If you've heard of the Nexus 9000 series switches, then you probably, oh yeah, I heard about it. So basically what we are doing is we are bringing in an SDN controller, which is called the Application Policy Infrastructure Controller, APIC. So it's an acronym. So we enable what are called as policy profiles, application network profiles, to be created from this SDN controller, and we'll be able to automate the entire L2 to L7 lifecycle, the provisioning, configuration, real-time monitoring, troubleshooting on an application basis, on a tenant basis. So you basically now have an application-centric infrastructure for your network. Basically like we did with UCS. You're familiar with UCS, the Cisco servers? We basically had this concept of a service profile. You're able to provision, the compute infrastructure based on the compute requirements of an application. Same thing we have done with the ACI innovation, the ability to provision the networking resources for a given application using the same stateless abstraction principle. So that's just a high-level overview of what A10 and Cisco ACI have brought together to the data center landscape. So before I go into the presentation, I want to quickly point out that A10 started working with us last year, about a year ago, and in less than a year we've got a great momentum in integrating their device package for Cisco ACI, and we are already FCS, and a lot of customers are in the process of testing it out in POC and pretty close to production. So that gives you a feel for how Cisco's open ecosystem, namely the open APIs, have enabled our valuable partners like A10, Citrix, Palo Alto Networks, F5. They've all basically written to this ACI open APIs. So irrespective of whether you have so-and-so's L4, L7 service or firewalls, we have a clean open API-based solution that will seamlessly automate your entire L2 to L7 experience. So let's go into the presentation now. So as most of you know, that businesses are now increasingly demanding the IT to be closely aligned with the business needs, right? You want to basically, get an application out to the market. Your IT should be able to align the infrastructure fast. You cannot really spend, weeks together in provisioning your compute, network, and storage. And time to market is everything. So most of the businesses are now seeking this transition to cloud operations. So all these parameters like, open ecosystem, lower TCO, simplified operations are paramount for a lot of the IT. So the ACI strategy, the Cisco Application-Centric Infrastructure strategy, in about a year's time, since the same time that we started working with A10 Networks, we've been FCS, ACI has been FCS also around the same time only, right? So we got 1,700 customers that have already bought the Cisco Nexus 9000 platforms, 300 plus customers running our SDN controller, which is called the APIC, like I said, the Application Policy Infrastructure Controller. And then about 35 ecosystem partners, most of them are in this RSA conference. So if you walk from the South Hall here to the North Hall there, you'll pretty much see all these partners, right? So that gives you a testimonial to the openness of the ACI platform. So what is relevant in this presentation is A10 Networks is one such valuable partners, ecosystem partners of Cisco that has basically, integrated their solution with Cisco ACI. So we're going to focus on that solution, but I wanted to paint the landscape as to what the ACI strategy is. The ACI strategy is essentially a hardware, which is a purpose-built hardware, the Nexus 9000 platform, an SDN controller, and an open ecosystem, okay? So that's really, the ACI landscape for you. So what are some of the key highlights or attributes of the ACI architecture? The first and foremost is the ACI architecture is agnostic to whether your infrastructure is physical or virtual. That means you can be running your applications in a virtual machine, or it could be on a bare metal. It could be a A10 Thunder physical appliance, or a virtual appliance, or a hybrid appliance. So ACI is agnostic, to the physical and the virtual nature of the infrastructure and the endpoints. That's the number one attribute. Because in today's world, you have applications like big data and Hadoop. They all need to run in bare metal servers, right? But then you have some applications like SAP, CRM applications that run on your virtual machines. But you need to be able to, control and have visibility into these applications irrespective of the type of the infrastructure on which it is running. The second capability that we bring in the architecture is called the application-centric policy model. This is very important. So in today's world, we call it the DevOps world, the apps developers, the network specialists, and the security people, they all come together, collaborate, and create what is called as the application network profile. So it's essentially, the set of policies that are basically required for the web tier to talk to the app tier, and the policies that are required for the app tier to talk to the database tier. So it's basically encoded into this application network profile. These policies are put into those profiles. So once you deploy the policies, you will have the entire L2 to L7 infrastructure automated according to this policy. So you don't really need to go manually tweak your load balancer or a firewall. It's all per the policy. Similarly, changes are also easy to make. You just make changes to the policy, and you push the policy, you have the new changes already in place into the network. The last but not the least is the open and secure nature of the Open ACI platform. So we have got open APIs on the southbound side as well as on the northbound side of the APIC controller. So southbound side is all Python and REST APIs that partners like A10 have taken and extended and integrated with us. On the northbound side, we have similarly integrations with Splunk, Microsoft, VMware, and various types of systems management and orchestration vendors is offering. So it's a complete open ACI, open ecosystem-based ACI. So in the context of the A10 ACI solution, the three principal elements are the Cisco hardware, which is the Nexus 9000 platform, the controller, which is called the APIC controller, and then the A10 infrastructure. So the A10 Thunder infrastructure comes in three different flavors, as I mentioned earlier. It could be a physical appliance or a virtual instantiation, or it could be a hybrid. It doesn't matter. So all of them seamlessly integrate with the APIC controller through the open API, so we can basically provision applications L2 to L7 using these policy profiles. So here is actually an illustration and a screenshot. So if I just present marketing materials, you're not going to get the feel for how it is really, integrating. So we took a screenshot of our SDN controller. On the left-hand side is basically how the integration happens between our APIC SDN controller and the A10 Thunder appliance. So we expose interfaces, which are basically Python interfaces that talks to this A10 appliance. And similarly, on the controller-facing side, we have interfaces that enable us to, send those configurations to the A10. So the A10 people, they develop what is called as a device package, and they load it into this APIC. That's all you need. Once you have done that, the entire provisioning, configuration, monitoring is all automated for you using these interfaces. So tomorrow you will have a different application change. So all you do is tweak your application profile and you push it, then the A10 device gets a new configuration. You don't need to touch it manually, okay? There is another important facet in the integration that our solution characterizes, and that is what is called as a service chaining. So like I said, if you have a web tier and an app tier, so the web tier may only allow a HTTPS type traffic to go to the app tier, let's say, right? That's like a policy. Or you may have a firewall that will allow only certain types of users inside. Whatever be your policy. So we enable, using the service chaining or service graph concept, the ability to drag and drop your security policies between two tiers, namely the web tier and the app tier, or the app tier and the database tier. So once you drag and drop this gets loaded into the APIC controller, and now you have your L4, L7 policies, automatically incorporated. So when the application starts spitting out data, the chaining is done in hardware for you automatically. All you do is logically model the service graph, and the runtime takes care of the exact path for you, all the way from your layer 2 to your layer 7. So what does it give you as a customer who wants to deploy the solution? Why do you really care? The reason you care is, at the very beginning we discussed that most businesses are asking for agility, right? So how fast can I get my applications to my customer? That's the number one concern for all the customers. So number one value prop is the agility. Automation, you don't want to be doing it manually. And the net benefit of that is reduced total cost of operations. So the controller does the automation for you. As a result, you get speed of reaching the customer, reduced manual operations, and less chances of errors, and lower cost of operations. This device package that I talked about, the A10 device package for Cisco ACI, it's a bunch of steps, which is a very, very simple workflow that is shown here. The device package is uploaded into the Cisco SDN controller, and then these interfaces enable the configuration to be pushed to the A10 appropriate device, whether it is a physical or a virtual or a hybrid. So it's a very simple workflow, and this is the overall ecosystem. As you can see here, the network is here, the controller is here, the devices are here, and your applications is spitting data through the network, and it gets stitched according to the policies that you define through the application network profile. So the 1,700 customers that I showed at the very beginning, a lot of them have been able to benefit from a business outcome standpoint. They're able to obtain, through a Cisco IT study, we have benchmarked these savings, 50+% in network provisioning costs, in terms of capex reduction, because Cisco ACI uses BiDi optics. So when you move from 10 gig to 40 gig, you use the same BiDi optics. There's no need for basically buying a new 40 gig interface. So use the 10 gig BiDi optics for your 40 gig migration. So those are very big savings from a capex standpoint. Then the management costs, it's unified management. The SDN controller is a single dashboard from where you manage the entire network, whether it is your L2, L3 network, or whether it is your A10 Thunder device. It's all single dashboard. Reduced power and cooling costs that comes from the hardware innovation in the Nexus 9000 switches. And finally, we also, optimize the storage. So overall, you get, total cost of ownership reduction coming from each one of these pillars. And in closing, I want to leave you with the thought. We have a web presence where you can read all the exciting development that we have done with A10. So we have a dedicated page on cisco.com. It's just a /go/ACI A10, or you can go to /go/ACI on cisco.com. All the relevant materials like white papers, data sheets, etc. you can get from these two websites. So that's a short presentation I had in this session.